Imagine a crisp summer morning at Lake Tahoe, where the sun sparkles off the deep blue water and the pine trees whisper secrets in the breeze. That's where our story begins, with a group of close friends, Jake, Sarah, and Mike, gearing up for what should have been an epic mountain biking adventure. These three were inseparable, the kind of buddies who shared everything from late-night laughs to dreams about the future. Jake was the adventurous one, always pushing the limits with his daredevil stunts on the trails. Sarah, his girlfriend, brought the heart to the group, with her infectious smile and way of making everyone feel like family. And Mike? He was the steady hand, the guy who mapped out the routes and packed extra water just in case. They loaded up their bikes, excited about tackling the rugged paths around the lake, snapping selfies with the stunning Sierra Nevada mountains in the background. Lake Tahoe was their playground, a place of beauty and thrill, but that day, something went terribly wrong. As they pedaled deeper into the wilderness, the trails grew steeper, winding through dense forests and along sheer drop-offs. They were experienced riders, no strangers to the challenges of mountain biking in such a remote area. But as the hours ticked by, radio silence set in. Their families waited back at the cabin, expecting them to return by sunset with stories of close calls and breathtaking views. When night fell and there was no sign of them, worry turned to panic. Search parties combed the area, hikers, helicopters, even divers scanning the lake's icy depths. Days turned into weeks, but there was nothing, no bikes, no gear, no trace of the three friends who had simply vanished into thin air. The community rallied, posting flyers and sharing pleas on social media, desperate for any clue about what happened on those treacherous paths. Whispers spread about the dangers of Lake Tahoe's hidden cliffs and unpredictable weather, but no one could explain how three fit, careful people could disappear without a single footprint left behind. Years passed, and the case grew cold. Jake's parents clung to hope, visiting the lake every anniversary to lay flowers at the trailhead. Sarah's little sister grew up wondering if her big sis was out there somewhere, lost but alive. Mike's best friend from college started a podcast, digging into similar vanishings in the region, but leads always dried up. The mystery haunted everyone who knew them, a reminder of how quickly joy can turn to heartbreak in nature's unforgiving embrace. Mountain biking enthusiasts still rode those same trails, but with a newfound caution, sharing tales of the Tahoe 3 around campfires. Then, 5 years later, a lone hiker stumbled upon something chilling on a 160-foot cliff overlooking the lake, a spot so remote and perilous that rescuers had overlooked it before. What he found sent shockwaves through the town, reopening old wounds and raising questions no one saw coming. Was it a clue to their fate, or something even more unimaginable? Let's rewind a bit to understand who these folks really were, because mysteries like this don't just happen to strangers. They hit home when you know the people behind the headlines. Jake Thompson was the kind of guy everyone envied a little. At 28, he had that rugged charm, with sun-bleached hair from too many days on the trails and a laugh that could light up a room. He grew up in Reno, just a short drive from Lake Tahoe, and mountain biking wasn't just a hobby for him. It was his escape. He'd quit a steady job in tech sales a couple years back to chase freeride competitions, posting videos on social media of him dropping off insane ledges and carving through powder like dirt. His followers loved it, but his parents worried. He was always one bad fall away from disaster. Sarah Ellis, his girlfriend of 3 years, was the balance to his chaos. She was 26, a graphic designer from Sacramento who met Jake at a local bike shop event. Sarah had this quiet strength, the type who could pedal up the steepest climbs without complaining, all while sketching wildflower designs in her notebook during breaks. She dreamed of starting a family one day, but for now, she was all in on adventures with Jake, tagging along on his Tahoe trips like they were weekend getaways to paradise. And then there was Mike Rivera, the third wheel who somehow made the group whole. Mike was 29, a high school teacher from Truckee, right on the edge of the lake. He was the planner, the one who double-checked tire pressure and packed energy bars. Mike had been friends with Jake since college, bonding over late-night rides and shared heartbreaks. He was dealing with his own stuff back then, a recent divorce that left him quieter than usual, but he found solace in the mountains, where the only thing that mattered was the next turn. That fateful day started like any other Tahoe adventure. It was mid-July, the air crisp with a scent of pine and wild sage, the kind of weather that draws crowds to the lake's crystal-clear shores. The three had planned this ride for weeks, mapping out a loop that hugged the eastern side of Lake Tahoe, dipping into the Desolation Wilderness area. They weren't newbies. They'd tackled similar routes before, navigating the granite slabs and rooty descents that make Tahoe mountain biking world famous. Jake was pumped about testing a new full suspension bike he'd scored on sale. Sarah was excited to capture some photos for her portfolio, and Mike just wanted to clear his head after a tough school year. They set off from the trailhead near Fallen Leaf Lake, bikes loaded with hydration packs, repair kits, and snacks. Witnesses later recalled seeing them laughing as they pedaled away, a young couple and their buddy, helmets on, ready to conquer the day. The trail they chose was challenging but popular. It wound through old-growth forests, past alpine meadows bursting with lupin flowers, and along ridges with jaw-dropping views of the lake's emerald waters. But Tahoe's beauty hides its dangers. Those mountains are riddled with sheer cliffs, sudden weather shifts, and wildlife that can startle even the most seasoned rider. By noon, they should have hit the halfway point, maybe stopped for a quick dip in a hidden cove. Instead, that's when things went silent. Back at the cabin they'd rented in South Lake Tahoe, Jake's mom, Linda, was prepping burgers for their return. She was used to her son's wild side, but something felt off when the sun started dipping low without a text or call. Sarah's parents were out of town, but her sister Emily, just 19 at the time, was staying with friends nearby and grew anxious as evening set in. Mike's ex-wife even reached out, hearing whispers through mutual friends. By nightfall, the authorities were involved. The El Dorado County Sheriff's Office launched an initial search, deploying teams on foot and ATVs along the known trails. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkening sky, while volunteers from the Tahoe Rim Trail Association joined in, combing the underbrush for any sign, a dropped water bottle, a skid mark, anything. The lake itself became a suspect. Tahoe's depths are notorious for swallowing secrets, with currents that can drag things under and cold water that preserves mysteries for decades. Divers plunged into the frigid blue, scanning for submerged bikes or gear, but came up empty. Theories swirled early on. Maybe a rockslide buried them, or a bear encounter turned deadly, though black bears in the area are more scared of humans than vice versa. Some locals whispered about foul play, pointing to the remote spots where hikers sometimes cross paths with sketchy types. But with no evidence, the search scaled back after 2 weeks, leaving families shattered and the community on edge. As months turned into years, the disappearance of the Tahoe 3, as the media dubbed them, faded from front-page news but lingered like a ghost in the Sierra Nevada. Jake's dad, Tom, a retired firefighter, threw himself into advocacy, pushing for better trail signage and GPS requirements for backcountry riders. He organized annual memorial rides, where dozens of bikers would gather at the trailhead, helmets bowed in silence before hitting the paths in honor of his son. Sarah's family coped differently. Her mom turned to therapy, while Emily channeled her grief into activism, starting a nonprofit for missing persons in outdoor sports. She pored over maps, interviewed witnesses, and even hired a private investigator who specialized in wilderness cases. Mike's loved ones held onto slivers of hope too. His sister Maria kept his classroom desk just as he'd left it, with lesson plans on environmental science, a nod to his love for Tahoe's fragile ecosystem. The case drew podcasters and true crime enthusiasts who dissected every detail. The last photo Jake posted on Instagram, a selfie with Sarah and Mike grinning against a backdrop of jagged peaks. The weather report showing a sudden afternoon squall that could have slicked the trails. Reports of unusual animal activity near the 160-foot cliffs overlooking Emerald Bay. Speculation ran wild online. Forums buzzed with ideas about hidden caves, accidental falls, or even deliberate vanishing to start new lives. But nothing stuck. Lake Tahoe, with its 1,645 feet of depth and miles of untamed shoreline, seemed to mock the efforts, its serene surface hiding whatever truths lay below. 5 years on, the pain had dulled but never healed. Birthdays came and went without celebrations. Holidays felt hollow. Jake would have been 33 now, maybe settling down. Sarah, 31, perhaps with kids of her own. Mike, 34, inspiring a new generation of students. The families had formed a tight-knit support group, meeting monthly to share updates or just cry together. Then came that hiker, a guy named Alex from San Francisco, out for a solo trek to clear his mind after a breakup. He wasn't looking for anything, just following an overgrown spur trail that veered off the main path, drawn by the promise of a killer viewpoint. The spot was treacherous, a narrow ledge perched 160 feet above the crashing waves, wind whipping through the Jeffrey pines. Alex nearly turned back when the ground grew loose, rocks tumbling into the abyss below. But something caught his eye, glinting in the late afternoon sun. At first, he thought it was trash, a discarded can or bottle from careless tourists. As he edged closer, heart pounding, he realized it was more. Wedged between boulders, partially buried in dirt and pine needles, was a mangled piece of metal. It looked like part of a bike frame, twisted and rusted from exposure, but with flecks of red paint that matched Jake's new ride. Nearby, snagged on a jagged root, fluttered a scrap of fabric. Could it be from Sarah's favorite jersey? Alex's hands shook as he snapped photos, careful not to disturb the scene. He scrambled back to cell service and called it in, his voice breathless with disbelief. Word spread like wildfire through Tahoe's tight community. Sheriff's deputies rappelled down the cliff the next day, securing the site while forensics teams swarmed. The discovery reopened the case file, dusting off old reports and reigniting media frenzy. Reporters camped out at the trailhead, interviewing anyone with a story. Old search volunteers recounting eerie nights in the woods, psychics claiming visions of a struggle. Families rushed to the scene, hope warring with dread. Linda clutched a photo of Jake, tears streaming as she stared at the cliff's edge. "Is this it?" she whispered to Tom. "After all this time?" Experts weighed in. Geologists explained how erosion could have exposed hidden spots over years, while survivalists debated if anyone could have survived a fall from that height. But questions piled up faster than answers. How did the items end up there, far from the planned route? Were there signs of a crash, or something more sinister? And why only fragments, no bodies, no full bikes? Whispers of conspiracy crept in. Maybe they'd stumbled upon something they shouldn't have, like an illegal grow operation in the backcountry, or crossed paths with poachers. Online sleuths dissected Alex's photos, zooming in on anomalies. Was that a scratch mark on the metal, like from claws or tools? The tension built, families oscillating between elation at a breakthrough and terror at what it might reveal. As investigators pieced together timelines, more layers emerged. Turns out, the three had veered off their intended path that day. Cell phone pings showed them heading toward the cliff area around 2 p.m., perhaps lured by a shortcut or scenic detour. Mike's journal, found in his truck, mentioned wanting to explore untouched ridges for birdwatching, a hobby he'd picked up post-divorce. Sarah's last text to Emily was cryptic. "Views are insane, wish you were here," sent just before signals dropped. Jake's GoPro, which he'd mounted on his helmet, was never recovered, but friends recalled him joking about capturing epic fails for laughs. The cliff itself held its own dark history. Locals shared tales of past accidents, from climbers slipping to hikers lost in fog. One story stood out. A decade earlier, a solo biker vanished nearby, bike found mangled at the base, body never recovered. Coincidence or pattern? Wildlife experts chimed in, noting mountain lions in the area, though attacks are rare. Weather records confirmed a microburst storm that afternoon, winds gusting to 40 miles per hour, enough to knock riders off balance on exposed edges. The families grappled with the emotional whiplash. Emily dove deeper into research, scouring old maps for hidden trails, convinced Sarah would have left clues if she could. Tom hired a drone operator to survey the cliff space, hoping for more debris washed up on the shore. Maria, Mike's sister, revisited his belongings, finding a note about facing fears that now seemed ominous. Support poured in, donations for renewed searches, vigils by the lake with candles reflecting on the water. But doubt lingered. What if this was a false lead, planted or coincidental? Alex, the hiker, faced scrutiny too. Online trolls accused him of hoaxing for attention, though his story checked out. As days stretched into weeks post-discovery, the suspense thickened. Lab tests on the items dragged on, DNA analysis pending. The Tahoe 3 story, once cold, burned hot again. A reminder of nature's cruel indifference and the human need for closure. Yet, with every new detail, the mystery only deepened, leaving everyone wondering what really happened on that 160-foot cliff, and would the full truth ever surface from the shadows of Lake Tahoe? The air around Lake Tahoe felt heavier now, charged with a mix of hope and dread as the discovery on the 160-foot cliff sent ripples through the community. The mangled bike frame and tattered fabric scrap had been whisked away to a forensics lab in Sacramento, but answers were slow to come. Every day without news felt like a fresh wound for the families of Jake, Sarah, and Mike. The cliff itself became a pilgrimage site, cordoned off with yellow tape, but drawing curious hikers, true crime buffs, and even spiritualists who claimed the area held unsettled energy. Linda, Jake's mom, stood at the trailhead one chilly morning, clutching a thermos of coffee, staring at the distant ridge where her son's life might have unraveled. She'd stopped sleeping much, her dreams haunted by visions of Jake tumbling into the void, his laughter swallowed by the wind. Tom, her husband, tried to stay strong, organizing volunteers to scour nearby trails for anything else, more debris. a lost phone, even a footprint preserved in hardened mud. But the mountain seemed to guard its secrets, its granite faces silent under the autumn sky. Meanwhile, Emily, Sarah's sister, threw herself into the mystery with a fierceness that surprised everyone. She wasn't just grieving. She was fighting, convinced that Sarah, with her sharp instincts, would have left some kind of sign, a scratched message, a hidden marker, if things had gone wrong. Emily's nonprofit had grown, pulling in donations from across the country, and she used the funds to hire a retired park ranger, Clara, who knew Tahoe's backcountry like her own backyard. Clara brought a new perspective, one grounded in decades of navigating the Sierra Nevada's wild heart. She'd seen her share of accidents, hikers lost to hypothermia, climbers felled by loose rock, but something about this case nagged at her. The cliff where Alex found the bike frame wasn't on any map the trio had shared with their families. It was a gnarly, off-trail spot, accessible only by scrambling over boulders and skirting a dizzying drop to the lake below. Clara hiked there herself, roping up for safety, and noticed something odd. Faint tire tracks, barely visible under layers of pine needles, veering toward the cliff's edge. They didn't match the chaotic skid marks of a crash. They looked deliberate, like someone had ridden close to the drop on purpose. She kept this to herself for now, not wanting to fuel wild theories, but she shared her doubts with Emily. "This doesn't feel like an accident," Clara said, her voice low as they sat by a campfire. "Either they got lost or something or someone drew them there." Emily's heart raced. She'd always assumed nature was the culprit, but Clara's words opened a darker door. Could the three have stumbled into trouble? Tahoe's wilderness wasn't just bears and storms. It had its share of shady characters, poachers, illegal campers, even rumors of drug runners using remote trails to move product. Emily started digging into police reports from 5 years back, looking for anything suspicious around the time of the disappearance. Meanwhile, Mike's sister, Maria, was wrestling with her own angle. She'd been going through his old emails, searching for clues in the months leading up to that July ride. Mike had been quieter after his divorce, but he'd started opening up to her about a new passion: conservation. He joined a local group fighting to protect Tahoe's ecosystem from over-tourism and illegal logging. One email, sent just a week before the trip, mentioned a weird run-in with a guy at a trailhead who'd been acting cagey, asking too many questions about their biking plans. Mike had brushed it off as nothing, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling it mattered. She reached out to the conservation group, and one member, an older woman named Ruth, recalled Mike being spooked about outsiders hanging around restricted areas. Ruth mentioned a shady outfit that had been spotted near Desolation Wilderness, guys in unmarked trucks, hauling gear that didn't look like camping equipment. Maria's stomach churned. Could Mike have seen something he shouldn't have? She shared her findings with the sheriff's office, but they were stretched thin, juggling the new evidence with a backlog of cases. The lead investigator, Detective Patel, was sympathetic but cautious. "We're looking into everything," he told her, "but we need more than hunches to go on." The community was buzzing with theories, each one adding to the suspense that clung to Tahoe like morning fog. Online forums exploded with speculation. Some argued the trio had been caught in a freak storm, their bikes swept over the cliff by gale-force winds. Others pointed to the lake itself, its depths a perfect hiding place for evidence washed away by currents. A few wilder posts claimed extraterrestrial involvement, citing Tahoe's history of odd lights in the sky, a theory the families dismissed but couldn't entirely ignore. Then there was Alex, the hiker who'd found the bike frame. He was struggling under the spotlight, his quiet life upended by media attention. Reporters dug into his background, uncovering a minor arrest from years ago for trespassing on private land, a detail that fueled conspiracy nuts. Alex insisted he was just a guy who loved hiking, but the scrutiny made him jumpy. He started getting anonymous messages, some praising him as a hero, others accusing him of planting the evidence for fame. One night, he found a note slipped under his apartment door. "Stop talking or you're next." He reported it to the police, but the vague threat only deepened the mystery. Was Alex a key to unlocking the truth, or had he stumbled into something bigger than he realized? Back at the cliff, the investigation hit snags. The bike frame was confirmed as Jake's, a custom model with a serial number etched into the bottom bracket. The fabric was trickier. It matched Sarah's jersey in color and material, but exposure to the elements had degraded any DNA. Forensics teams found no blood, no signs of a struggle, just the eerie placement of the items, as if they'd been tossed or dragged. A geologist brought in to study the site noted that the cliff's loose shale could have shifted over years, exposing debris that had been buried. But that didn't explain why the items were so far from the trio's planned route. Emily, working with Clara, started mapping alternative paths, using old satellite imagery to trace where the three might have gone. They found a faint trail, barely a deer path, that looped toward the cliff from a ridge a mile away. It wasn't on any biking maps, but locals knew it as a sketchy shortcut used by thrill seekers. Had Jake, always chasing the next adrenaline rush, convinced the others to try it? Or had they been forced off their path? Emily's mind spun with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. The families weren't alone in their search for answers. A young journalist named Sam, who'd grown up in South Lake Tahoe, took up the story for a local paper. He'd been a kid when the trio vanished, but their case had stuck with him, a reminder of how fragile life in the mountains could be. Sam interviewed old search volunteers, some of whom recalled hearing strange noises, distant shouts, a metallic clink, during the initial rescue efforts. One volunteer, a retired cop named Gary, swore he'd seen a figure watching from a ridge the night of the search, gone when he looked again. Sam also tracked down a biker who'd ridden the same trail days before the disappearance. The guy mentioned a group of weird dudes camping off-trail, with no bikes or hiking gear, just sitting in silence as he passed. Sam's articles stirred fresh interest, drawing tips from readers. One anonymous caller claimed to have seen a bike being loaded into a truck near Emerald Bay that July, but the lead went cold when the caller stopped responding. Sam kept pushing, sensing the story was bigger than a simple accident, but every thread seemed to nod into another dead end. As winter loomed, the Tahoe 3's case took on a life of its own. Social media campaigns, fueled by Emily's nonprofit, kept the story trending, with hashtags like #FindTheTahoe3 and #LakeTahoeMystery. A documentary crew from San Francisco arrived, filming moody shots of the lake's misty shores and interviewing tearful family members. But the attention came with a cost. Linda and Tom argued more, the strain of hope and grief pulling them apart. Maria started having panic attacks, triggered by memories of Mike's voice on old voicemails. Even Clara, the stoic ranger, admitted to Emily that the case was getting under her skin. She'd found a small carving on a tree near the cliff, a crude arrow pointing down, too weathered to date, but too deliberate to ignore. Was it a marker from the trio, or just a hiker's whim? The families clung to each clue, no matter how small, but the lack of closure was suffocating. Detective Patel warned them that lab results could take months and, even then, might not tell the full story. The cliff, the bike, the fabric, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was still maddeningly out of focus. Every night, Emily lay awake, staring at maps spread across her floor, tracing routes until her eyes burned. She thought of Sarah's last text, those insane views, and wondered what her sister had seen in those final moments. Jake's GoPro haunted her too. If it was out there, its footage could hold the key. Maria, meanwhile, kept digging into Mike's conservation work, uncovering emails hinting at tensions with local developers who wanted to expand trails into protected areas. Could he have crossed someone powerful? And Alex, shaken by the threatening note, started hiking with a friend, his eyes scanning the trees for more than just views. The lake itself seemed to watch, its surface calm but its depths unyielding, hiding whatever truth lay beneath. Each new lead, tire tracks, a strange carving, a shady camper, tightened the knot of suspense, pulling everyone deeper into a mystery that refused to unravel. The Tahoe 3 were out there, somewhere in fragments or whispers, and the cliff secrets were only the beginning. The winter chill settled over Lake Tahoe, cloaking the mountains in a quiet that felt more oppressive than serene. The discovery on the 160-foot cliff had lit a spark, but as weeks dragged on without new answers, that spark was threatening to fizzle out. The families of Jake, Sarah, and Mike clung to every scrap of hope, their lives tethered to the mystery that refused to loosen its grip. Emily, Sarah's sister, was relentless, her apartment now a war room of maps, police reports, and pinned-up photos of the trio's last known moments. She'd barely slept since Clara, the retired ranger, pointed out those eerie tire tracks veering toward the cliff's edge. Emily kept replaying Sarah's last text, "Views are insane. Wish you were here," wondering if it was a clue or just her sister's usual enthusiasm. She and Clara had taken to hiking the backcountry together, tracing that faint deer path they'd found, hoping to uncover something the search teams missed. One frosty morning, they stumbled on a small, unnatural pile of rocks near the cliff, stacked too neatly to be random. Underneath, half buried in frozen dirt, was a battered water bottle with a faded sticker of a mountain lion, Mike's favorite animal. Emily's breath caught as she held it, her hands trembling. Was this a sign they'd been there, or had someone placed it to taunt them? Clara's face was grim. "This isn't natural," she muttered, scanning the horizon for anything out of place. The find was reported, but the sheriff's office warned that it could be coincidence. Hikers littered the trails with junk all the time. Yet Emily felt it in her gut. This was no accident. Across town, Maria, Mike's sister, was chasing her own lead, her heart pounding every time she opened his old laptop. She'd found more emails from his conservation group, including one from a guy named Derek, a fellow activist who'd since moved away. Derek had written about a confrontation Mike had with a group of men near the Desolation Wilderness, just days before the biking trip. They weren't hikers or campers, just rough-looking guys with a pickup truck unloading crates in a restricted area. Mike had reported it to the Forest Service, but nothing came of it. Maria tracked Derek down through a friend, and over a shaky video call, he looked nervous, his eyes darting off-screen. Mike was rattled, Derek said. Said one of the guys threatened to make him regret sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Maria pressed for details, but Derek clammed up, saying he didn't want trouble. The call ended abruptly, leaving Maria with a sinking feeling. She shared it with Detective Patel, who added it to the growing file but admitted they lacked manpower to chase every tip. Still, he assigned an officer to look into land records near the cliff, checking for illegal activity, logging, poaching, or worse. The idea that Mike might have crossed someone dangerous hung over Maria like a storm cloud, and she started locking her doors at night, something she'd never done in sleepy Truckee. Meanwhile, Alex, the hiker who'd found the bike frame, was unraveling under the pressure. The anonymous note, "Stop talking, or you're next," had shaken him, and now he was seeing shadows everywhere. He'd stopped hiking alone, bringing his buddy Ryan along, but even that didn't ease his nerves. On one trip back to the cliff to show Ryan the spot, they noticed something chilling, fresh boot prints in the snow, circling the taped-off area. They weren't from rangers or investigators. No official teams had been there in days. Alex's stomach dropped. Was someone watching the site, or cleaning up evidence? He reported it to the police, but the prints were gone by the time they arrived, melted by an unseasonable thaw. The incident pushed Alex to dig deeper himself, against Ryan's advice. He started asking around at local gear shops, showing photos of the bike frame, hoping someone might recognize it. An old shop owner, grizzled and suspicious, mentioned seeing a similar bike loaded onto a trailer 5 years back, driven by a guy who didn't look like a biker. Alex's pulse raced, but the owner couldn't recall more. The lead felt like another dead end, yet it fueled Alex's paranoia. He started keeping a journal, jotting down every detail, convinced he was being followed. Sam, the young journalist, was feeling the heat too. His articles on the Tahoe 3 had gone viral, pulling in tips from across the country, but also hate mail from skeptics who thought he was sensationalizing the tragedy. One tip stood out. A woman from Reno claimed her brother, a former trail guide, had seen a group of men burning gear in a remote fire pit near Emerald Bay around the time of the disappearance. The brother had passed away since, but she swore he'd been scared to report it, saying the men looked connected. Sam drove to Reno to meet her, his notebook filling with cryptic details. She showed him a photo her brother had taken, a blurry shot of a fire in the woods, with a glint of metal that could have been a bike part. Sam's heart pounded as he sent the image to Detective Patel, who promised to analyze it, though he warned that old photos were hard to verify. Sam's editor pushed him to keep digging, but the deeper he went, the more uneasy he felt. Late one night, while working at a coffee shop, he noticed a man staring from across the room, leaving when Sam looked up. It could have been nothing, but Sam's instincts screamed otherwise. He started carrying a pocket knife, a precaution he'd never needed in Tahoe's laid-back vibe. The families were fraying under the weight of it all. Linda and Tom's marriage was cracking, their arguments spilling into support group meetings. Linda wanted to believe Jake was still alive, maybe lost or hiding, while Tom was resigned to the worst, his hope buried under years of grief. One night, Linda snapped, accusing Tom of giving up on their son. "You don't even want to find him," she yelled, tears streaming. Tom stormed out, driving to the trailhead to sit alone in the dark, staring at the stars over the lake. Emily, meanwhile, was burning out, her obsession with the case straining her friendships. She'd quit her job to focus on the nonprofit, living off savings and donations, but the stress was taking a toll, migraines, sleepless nights, and a growing fear that she'd never get answers. Maria was no better, haunted by Mike's last email, where he'd written about facing fears on the trail. She started visiting a therapist, who suggested the note might have been about his divorce, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling it was tied to the cliff. The families leaned on each other, but the lack of progress was suffocating, like trying to breathe in Tahoe's thin mountain air. Then came a breakthrough, or so it seemed. Detective Patel called a meeting with the families, his face unreadable. The lab had finally processed the water bottle Emily and Clara found. Trace DNA matched Mike's, confirming it was his. But there was something else. Faint scratches on the bottle's rim, forming what looked like letters. HL, or maybe KL. No one knew what it meant, but it felt deliberate, like a message cut short. Patel's team also analyzed the tire tracks Clara had spotted, determining they were from a mountain bike, likely Jake's, but the pattern suggested a controlled stop, not a crash. The news sent the families reeling. Linda clutched the water bottle's photo, whispering, "Mike was trying to tell us something." Emily's mind raced. Could HL be initials, a code, or just random scratches? Clara suggested it might point to a location, maybe a hidden landmark, and she and Emily planned another hike to search for more clues. Maria, though, was fixated on the conservation angle, wondering if HL tied to the shady men Mike had encountered. She reached out to Derek again, but his number was disconnected, his social media gone dark. Panic crept in. Had he been scared off? The cliff itself seemed to pulse with secrets, drawing everyone closer to its edge. A new search was organized, this time with drones and thermal imaging, focusing on the rugged terrain below the 160-foot drop. Volunteers found nothing at first, but one drone operator spotted an anomaly, a dense cluster of brush near the lake's shore, hiding what looked like a tarp. When rangers investigated, they found it was just old camping gear, abandoned years ago, but the discovery fueled speculation. Was it a decoy, or unrelated? Online forums exploded with theories. Some said the trio had been targeted by a criminal ring. Others argued they'd fallen victim to a rogue wave from the lake, a rare but deadly phenomenon. Alex, now a reluctant figure in the saga, received another note, this one scrawled on a torn map fragment. "Leave the cliff alone." He handed it to Patel, who increased patrols around the site but found no suspects. Sam, meanwhile, got a tip from an anonymous commenter on his blog, claiming a local developer had been buying up land near the cliff 5 years ago, pushing out conservationists like Mike. The commenter hinted at accidents to silence opposition, but offered no proof. As the days grew shorter, the tension was unbearable. Emily and Clara planned a risky night hike to the cliff, hoping darkness might reveal hidden clues, like reflective markers or signs missed in daylight. Maria met with a private investigator, spending her savings to track down Derek or anyone linked to Mike's conservation work. Linda and Tom, despite their fights, joined a vigil by the lake, candles flickering as they prayed for answers. Alex, against his better judgment, returned to the trailhead alone, driven by a need to understand why he was being targeted. Sam kept writing, his latest article hinting at a cover-up, though he feared crossing a line that might put him in danger. Every step forward seemed to pull the truth further away, like chasing a mirage across Tahoe's shimmering waters. The cliff loomed in their minds, its jagged edge a silent witness to whatever had happened that July day. The Tahoe 3's fate was closer than ever to being uncovered, but the shadows around it were growing darker, and the answers, if they came, might cost more than anyone was ready to pay. The night air at Lake Tahoe was sharp, cutting through jackets as Emily and Clara trekked toward the cliff under a moonless sky. Their headlamps cast shaky beams across the rocky trail, illuminating gnarled pines and the faint outline of that 160-foot drop. Emily's heart hammered, not just from the climb but from the weight of what they might find. The water bottle with Mike's DNA and those cryptic scratches, HL or KL, had ignited a fire in her. She was sure Sarah would have left something, anything, to point the way. Clara, ever the cautious ranger, carried a rope and a knife, her eyes scanning for signs of disturbance. They reached the cliff's edge, where the wind howled like a warning, and started searching for reflective markers or hidden carvings. Then, in a crevice between two boulders, Clara's light caught a glint, something metallic, half-buried. It was a GoPro camera, its lens cracked but intact, the same model Jake always strapped to his helmet. Emily's breath hitched as she grabbed it, her fingers trembling with the possibility that it held footage from that day. But before they could process the find, Clara froze, her hand gripping Emily's arm. A faint rustle came from the trees behind them, not the wind, a deliberate crunch of boots on gravel. Someone was out there, watching. They doused their lights and crouched, hearts pounding, but the sound stopped. Was it a hiker, a ranger, or something worse? They didn't wait to find out, slipping the GoPro into Clara's pack and retreating. the weight of the discovery, and the unseen threat pushing them to move faster than the treacherous trail allowed. Back in town, Maria was spiraling. Her private investigator had hit a wall trying to find Derek, Mike's conservation buddy, whose sudden disappearance from the grid felt too convenient. But the PI had uncovered something else, a land deal from 5 years ago, tied to a shady developer named Harlan Locke, initials HL. The name matched the scratches on Mike's water bottle, sending a chill down Maria's spine. Locke's company had bought up acres near the cliff for a proposed resort, a plan that stalled after protests from Mike's conservation group. The PI dug deeper, finding whispers of Locke's ties to unsavory types, private security firms with a reputation for making problems disappear. Maria's mind raced. Had Mike stumbled onto something during their ride, like an illegal operation tied to Locke's land grab? She shared the lead with Detective Patel, who looked weary but promised to look into Locke. "Be careful," he warned her. "People like that don't like being poked." Maria nodded, but fear was creeping in. She'd noticed a dark SUV parked outside her house twice that week, idling just long enough to make her uneasy. She started carrying pepper spray, her trust in Truckie's small-town safety shaken. Alex, meanwhile, was teetering on the edge of paranoia. The second note, "Leave the cliff alone," had come with a map fragment, showing the exact spot where he'd found the bike frame. It felt personal, like someone knew his every move. He confided in Ryan, his hiking buddy, who urged him to back off, but Alex couldn't. He'd started sneaking into online forums under a pseudonym, digging into Tahoe's history of missing hikers and shady land deals. One post caught his eye, a user claiming to have worked for a cleanup crew near Emerald Bay, hired to remove unwanted evidence after accidents. The account was deleted hours later, but Alex screenshot it, his hands shaking. He took it to Sam, the journalist, who was now working out of a friend's basement to avoid prying eyes. Sam's latest article had hinted at a cover-up, and the backlash was fierce. Angry emails, a slashed tire, and that same dark SUV Maria had seen, now tailing him on his drive home. Sam and Alex compared notes, piecing together a pattern. The cliff, the land deal, Mike's conservation work, and now the GoPro. Sam's gut told him they were close to something big, but the closer they got, the more dangerous it felt. He sent the screenshot to Patel, who confirmed the SUV's plates were registered to a shell company linked to, guess who, Harlan Locke. The families were drowning in the mounting tension. Linda and Tom were barely speaking, their grief splitting them into opposite corners. Linda clung to the hope that the GoPro might show Jake alive, maybe lost in the wilderness, while Tom braced for the worst, his firefighter instincts telling him the cliff held only tragedy. They attended another vigil by the lake, where Emily shared news of the GoPro find, her voice cracking as she begged for more volunteers to search the shore below the cliff. The crowd was somber, candles flickering against the wind, but a new face stood out. A man in a dark jacket, lingering at the edge, his face half hidden. Maria noticed him too, her pulse quickening. He looked like the guy from Derek's description, the one who'd threatened Mike. She snapped a photo with her phone, sending it to Patel, who promised to run facial recognition. The man vanished before the vigil ended, leaving Maria with a gnawing fear that they were being watched, not just by the lake's ghosts but by someone very real. Emily and Clara took the GoPro to a tech friend, hoping to salvage its footage. The memory card was waterlogged, but he managed to pull fragments of video, grainy clips of Jake riding, Sarah laughing, and Mike pointing at something off-camera, his face tense. The footage cut off abruptly, just as the trio veered onto an unmarked trail, the cliff looming in the background. One frame showed a shadow, human-shaped, too close for comfort. Emily's stomach dropped. Was it a hiker or someone tailing them? The tech promised to keep working, but warned that more data might be corrupted. Emily couldn't shake the image of that shadow, her dreams now filled with faceless figures chasing Sarah through the pines. She and Clara planned another search, this time with a drone operator to scan the cliff space for more clues. But the night before, Clara got a call from an unknown number, just heavy breathing before the line went dead. She brushed it off, but Emily saw the worry in her eyes. The cliff was no longer just a mystery, it was a threat, pulling them all toward its edge. Sam's investigation was hitting a breaking point. His editor warned him to tone down his articles, citing pressure from higher-ups, but Sam couldn't stop. He'd found a retired sheriff's deputy who'd worked the original search 5 years ago. Over beers, the deputy admitted they'd been told to avoid certain areas near the cliff, supposedly for safety reasons. He'd always thought it was odd, especially since the order came after a call from a developer's lawyer. Sam's blood ran cold. Harlan Locke's name came up again. He dug into public records, finding that Locke's company had donated heavily to local officials around the time of the disappearance. Was it a coincidence, or a payoff to keep questions at bay? Sam started drafting his next piece, but late that night, his laptop was hacked, files on the Tahoe 3 wiped clean. He had backups, but the message was clear. Someone wanted him to stop. He called Alex, his voice low. "We're in over our heads," he said, but both knew they couldn't back down. The stakes were higher than ever. Emily, clutching the GoPro's partial footage, felt closer to Sarah but more exposed, like every step toward the truth painted a target on her back. Maria's PI uncovered a new lead, a storage unit in Reno, rented under a fake name but linked to Locke's company, filled with old camping gear and bike parts. Patel's team got a warrant, but when they arrived, the unit was empty, cleaned out just days before. Alex, haunted by the notes, started sleeping with a baseball bat by his bed, convinced the next threat wouldn't be just words. Linda and Tom, tore apart but united by desperation, joined Emily's next search, rappelling gear in tow, determined to face the cliff themselves. The community rallied, but fear was spreading. Hikers reported strange figures on the trails, and a local shop owner swore he'd seen Locke's SUV near the trailhead. Social media buzzed with hashtag Tahoe3, but darker posts warned of forces protecting the lake's secrets. As the group prepared for a final push, a coordinated search with divers, drones, and volunteers, the cliff loomed larger, its shadows stretching over Tahoe's icy waters. The GoPro's footage, the scratched initials, Locke's shadow, it all pointed to a truth that was almost within reach, but the closer they got, the more it felt like the mountain itself was pushing back, ready to swallow them whole. The dawn broke over Lake Tahoe, casting a pale glow on the jagged cliff that had haunted so many for 5 long years. The coordinated search was in full swing, a desperate final push to uncover the truth about Jake, Sarah, and Mike, the Tahoe 3. Drones buzzed above the 160-foot drop, their cameras sweeping the rocky shore below, while divers plunged into the icy waters, searching for anything the lake might have hidden. Emily stood at the cliff's edge, her hands clutching the GoPro, its partial footage now etched in her mind. Jake's grin, Sarah's laugh, Mike's tense glance at something, or someone, off camera. Clara, the retired ranger, was beside her, directing volunteers with a steely focus, her rope and knife ready for whatever the day might bring. Linda and Tom, their marriage battered but holding, rappelled down the cliff with a small team, their faces set with determination to find their son. Maria, clutching a photo of Mike, stayed on the shore, coordinating with the divers, her heart pounding with every update. Alex and Sam were there too, despite the threats dogging them. Alex, gripping his journal of cryptic notes, scanned the crowd for the man in the dark jacket, while Sam, his laptop now recovered, typed furiously, documenting the search for his next article. The air was thick with anticipation, the lake's surface glinting like it was holding its breath, waiting to reveal its secrets. The first breakthrough came just after noon. A diver surfaced, holding a twisted piece of metal, a bike pedal, rusted but unmistakably from Sarah's rig, identified by a custom sticker she designed. The crowd gasped, Emily's knees buckling as Clara steadied her. The pedal was found lodged in a crevice 50 feet below the surface, near the cliff's base, suggesting the lake had swallowed more than they'd realized. Divers doubled their efforts, and within hours, they pulled up a hydration pack, its straps frayed but with Jake's initials scratched into the buckle. The finds were agonizing, each one a step closer to the truth, but a stab to the family's fading hope. Then, the drone operator shouted, his screen showing a glint in a dense thicket just below the cliff. Volunteers hacked through the brush, uncovering a mangled bike wheel, Mike's, confirmed by its unique tire tread. The discoveries were piling up, painting a grim picture. The trio had gone over the edge, their gear scattered by the fall or swept into the lake's depths. But where were they? No bodies, no clear answers, just fragments of a day that had shattered so many lives. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the Sierra Nevada, Emily and Clara returned to the GoPro footage, now partially restored by the tech friend. The final frames were clearer. Jake riding ahead, Sarah calling out to slow down, and Mike stopping abruptly, pointing at a figure in the distance, a man in dark clothing, holding what looked like a rifle. The footage cut off as Jake turned toward the cliff's edge, the camera jolting violently. Emily's heart stopped. They were chased, she whispered, her voice breaking. Clara nodded, her face grim. The shadow in the footage matched the man Maria had seen at the vigil, the one tied to Harlan Locke, the developer whose initials, HL, had been scratched into Mike's water bottle. Detective Patel, now on site, watched the footage with a clenched jaw, his radio crackling as he called for backup. He'd been digging into Locke's company, uncovering ties to a private security firm with a history of handling environmental activists. The pieces were falling into place. Mike's conservation work had put him in Locke's crosshairs, and the trio's ride had taken them too close to something, maybe an illegal operation on Locke's land, that couldn't be exposed. The search took a darker turn as night fell. A volunteer found a small, hidden cave near the cliff's base, its entrance obscured by boulders. Inside, the team discovered a chilling sight, a pile of camping gear, including a torn jacket with Sarah's name stitched inside, and a notebook with Mike's handwriting detailing his suspicions about Locke's land deals. The final entry read, "Saw them again. They know we're here. Need to get out." The cave was a gut punch, proof the trio had been hiding, maybe running, before the cliff claimed them. Patel's team swept the cave for prints, finding traces of another person's presence, fresh boot marks that didn't match the trio's gear. The evidence pointed to foul play, and Patel issued a warrant for Locke's arrest, tracking him to a luxury cabin in North Tahoe. When deputies arrived, Locke was gone, his SUV spotted speeding toward the Nevada border. A manhunt began, helicopters chopping through the night sky, their spotlights cutting across the lake surface. The families huddled together, Linda sobbing into Tom's shoulder, Maria clutching the notebook, and Emily staring at the GoPro, willing it to give up one last secret. Then came the climax, a moment that tore through the suspense like a lightning bolt. Divers, working late under floodlights, surfaced with a sealed dry bag, found wedged in an underwater crevice. Inside was a memory card, miraculously intact, labeled Jake's backup. The tech friend worked through the night, pulling up a second video, one the trio had recorded after the GoPro cut off. It showed them in the cave, breathless and scared, Jake whispering, "They're after us." Mike saw their setup, crates, guns, looked like drugs. Sarah's voice trembled as she added, "We tried to get out, but they blocked the trail." Mike, his face pale, said, "If we don't make it, tell Emily, HL's behind it." The video ended with a crash, the sound of rocks falling, and a scream, Sarah's. The families watched in stunned silence, tears streaming as the truth hit. The trio had been hunted, cornered on that cliff by Locke's men, their fall no accident. The cave, the gear, the footage, it all confirmed a cover-up, Locke's operation desperate to bury their discovery. Patel vowed justice, his team closing in on Locke's last known location, but the victory felt hollow. The Tahoe 3 were gone, their lives traded for greed, their bodies likely claimed by the lake's unforgiving depths. But just as the families braced for closure, a final twist ripped the wound open. As the search wrapped up, a ranger patrolling a nearby trail found a fresh campsite, hidden deep in the pines, with a fire still smoldering. Among the ashes was a single item, a bracelet, woven with beads Sarah had made for Jake, unmistakable even in the dim light. It was clean, untouched by years of weather, as if placed there days ago. Emily's heart lurched. Had someone survived, hiding all this time? Or was this Locke's doing, a cruel taunt to keep the mystery alive? Patel's team swept the site, finding no tracks, no DNA, just the bracelet gleaming against the ash. The family stood frozen, the lake's waves lapping at the shore, whispering secrets that refused to surface. Social media exploded with hashtag Tahoe3, theories of survival clashing with cries for justice. Locke was still out there, the bracelet a question mark, and the cliff's shadow loomed larger than ever. The truth was clearer, but not complete. Tahoe's depths held one last secret, and it wasn't ready to let go. The smoldering campsite and Sarah's beaded bracelet found in the ashes sent a shockwave through the Tahoe 3's families, reigniting a flicker of hope they'd thought was long extinguished. The Lake Tahoe mystery, which had gripped the community for 5 years, now felt both closer to resolution and maddeningly elusive. Emily clutched the bracelet, its familiar weave a painful reminder of her sister's creative spirit, as she stood by the lake's edge, the Sierra Nevada mountains looming in the distance. The clean condition of the bracelet, untouched by years of weather, suggested it was placed recently, but by whom? Was it a survivor's desperate signal or a cruel taunt from Harlan Locke, the developer whose shadow hung over the tragedy? Detective Patel's team swept the campsite, but the lack of tracks or DNA left them grasping at straws. The families, battered by grief and the relentless pursuit of truth, refused to let this new clue slip away. Linda and Tom, their marriage strained but holding, joined Emily and Maria in a renewed vow. They'd chase every lead, no matter how faint, to uncover the final piece of the puzzle. The cliff, the lake, the GoPro footage, it all pointed to a dark truth, but but the bracelet suggested the story wasn't over. Patel's manhunt for Locke intensified, with helicopters scouring the Nevada border and deputies raiding his known properties. They found his North Tahoe cabin abandoned, papers shredded, and a safe emptied, but a hidden burner phone left behind held a single text: "Clean it up. Now." Sent the day before the campsite discovery, it was a breadcrumb, but enough to keep Patel's team on Locke's trail. Maria, meanwhile, was haunted by Mike's notebook, its final entry, "Need to get out," burned into her memory. She met with her private investigator, who'd uncovered more on Locke's operation, a network of shell companies tied to illegal logging and rumored drug smuggling, using Tahoe's remote trails as cover. Mike's conservation work had likely put him in their crosshairs, his reports to the Forest Service a threat to their profits. Maria shared this with Sam, the journalist, who was piecing together a final article despite the risks. Sam's laptop hack had shaken him, but the bracelet's discovery pushed him to go public, naming Locke and his ties to local officials. The article went viral, trending with hashtag Tahoe3, and brought a flood of tips, most dead ends, but one stood out. A trucker claiming he'd seen Locke near a Reno warehouse days ago, loading crates with armed men. Sam passed it to Patel, who mobilized a SWAT team, the net tightening around Locke. Emily and Clara, driven by the GoPro's chilling footage, returned to the cliff one last time, this time with a forensic archaeologist to examine the cave. The archaeologist found faint scratches on the cave wall, missed in the initial sweep. S+J+M=HL knows. It was a gut punch. Sarah, Jake, and Mike had left a final message, confirming they knew Locke was after them. Emily's eyes welled up, imagining her sister carving those letters in a frantic bid for survival. The archaeologist also found bone fragments in the cave's soil, too degraded for immediate identification but sent for urgent DNA testing. The families braced for the worst, yet the bracelet kept hope alive. Could one of them have escaped, hiding in the wilderness? Clara, ever practical, doubted it. Tahoe's harsh winters and lack of food made long-term survival unlikely, but she didn't voice it, seeing the spark in Emily's eyes. Instead, she helped organize a final volunteer sweep, focusing on remote trails near the campsite. They found nothing, but the effort brought the community together, locals and outsiders united in the search for closure. Alex, still rattled by the threatening notes, was struggling to stay involved. The map fragment and "leave the cliff alone" message had left him paranoid, but the bracelet's discovery pulled him back. He joined the volunteers, his journal now a record of every strange encounter. At the sweep, he overheard a hiker mention a ghost camp, deep in the desolation wilderness, a spot where gear appeared and vanished overnight. Alex shared it with Emily, who saw it as a long shot but worth checking. She and Clara hiked to the site, a grueling trek through snow-dusted pines, and found traces of a recent fire, charred wood, a discarded energy bar wrapper, and a single tire track, fresh enough to suggest someone had been there within days. Emily's heart raced. Was it a survivor, or Locke covering his tracks? They photographed everything, sending it to Patel, who cross-referenced the tire track with those near the cliff. It was a match, not Jake's bike, but a heavier vehicle, possibly an ATV used by Locke's crew. The find was electrifying, proof that someone was still active in the area, but it also deepened the fear that Locke was closer than they thought. The turning point came a week later, when Patel's team raided the Reno warehouse. Inside, they found crates of illegal timber and, hidden in a false wall, a stash of documents linking Locke to a smuggling ring. Among them was a ledger listing disposal jobs. One dated the day the Tahoe 3 vanished, with coordinates matching the cliff. Locke was arrested that night, caught trying to cross into Mexico. Under interrogation, he cracked, admitting his crew had been running drugs through Tahoe's backcountry, using the cliff's remote trails as a drop point. Mike's conservation reports had threatened to expose them, so Locke's men tailed the trio that July day, intending to scare them off. Things went wrong. Jake's recklessness led them onto the unmarked trail, and when Mike confronted the men, a chase ensued. Locke claimed the trio's fall was an accident, their bikes skidding off the cliff in panic, but the GoPro's shadow and Mike's notebook suggested otherwise. Patel pressed harder, and Locke's story unraveled. His men had pushed the bikes over to stage a crash, hiding the bodies in the lake to avoid scrutiny. Divers returned to the coordinates, recovering skeletal remains entangled in underwater roots. DNA confirmed it. Jake, Sarah, and Mike, together at last, their lives stolen by greed. The families gathered at the lake for a private memorial, the weight of closure heavy but necessary. Linda and Tom held each other, their marriage finding fragile footing in shared grief. Maria read from Mike's notebook, his love for Tahoe's beauty a bittersweet reminder of why he'd fought. Emily, clutching Sarah's bracelet, spoke of her sister's courage, vowing to keep her nonprofit alive to protect others in the wilderness. The community mourned, #Tahoe3 trending with tributes, but the bracelet's mystery lingered. Locke denied placing it and no fingerprints were found. Emily couldn't let it go, her mind replaying the clean beads, the fresh campsite. Then, in a quiet moment, a local teen approached her at the memorial, nervous and clutching a letter. She'd found it in her family's cabin, tucked in a book, dated a year after the disappearance. It was from Sarah, scribbled in haste. "I got away. Hiding. Don't trust HL. Tell Emily I'm sorry." The teen's family had been out of town that summer, their cabin empty, perfect for a fugitive. Emily's world tilted. Had Sarah survived, only to vanish again? The letter's paper was weathered, but its ink was clear, suggesting she'd been alive, at least for a while. Patel reopened the case, now searching for Sarah as a missing person. Divers found no new evidence, but the letter gave Emily purpose. She and Clara scoured the wilderness, chasing rumors of a lone woman seen in remote camps, always one step ahead. Maria channeled her grief into advocacy, joining Emily's nonprofit to fight for stricter land protections, ensuring Mike's death wasn't in vain. Alex, freed from the threats with Locke's arrest, wrote a book about his role, donating proceeds to the families. Sam's final article exposed Locke's corruption, earning him a journalism award but also a quiet move to a safer city. The lake, once a keeper of secrets, now felt like a guardian, holding Sarah's fate in its depths. Emily stood by the shore one last time, the bracelet on her wrist, whispering, "I'll find you, sis." The Tahoe3 story ended with justice, but Sarah's letter left a haunting echo, a reminder that some mysteries, like the lake itself, never fully give up their truths. The Sierra Nevada stood silent, their peaks a testament to resilience, loss, and the enduring pull of hope.